The rolling shutter is a method of image capture that does not snap the entire image in a single instant. Rather, the rolling shutter scans across the scene rapidly. In other words, not all parts of the image are taken at the same time. This means that the faster an object moves in front of a camera, the higher the degree of distortion is on the image captured. This is why images or videos of a rotating propeller looks distorted on the screen. The rolling shutter is found on many digital and video cameras using a CMOS sensor. Most of our cell phones uses a CMOS sensor. It is widely used despite of this artifact because it is a lot cheaper and has a higher sensitivity than its alternative, the CCD sensor. Researchers and people of the industry are finding ways to minimize these distortion effects. However, my final year project decides to exploit this aliasing effect to obtain useful information. My name is Junyi, and this is listening to what the camera sees, not hear. So here's a quick summary to the entire project. The aim of the project is to reproduce the sound played on a guitar without actually using a microphone. Purely images. Here's the process. We first choose a video that shows a rolling shutter aliasing effect, grayscale the video, use an edge detection algorithm to extract only the edges, transfer the video information into a computable plane, for example, the XY Cartesian plane, segment each string of the plot separately, get the zero crossings of the string, calculate the period in pixel, calculate the pixel frequency, convert it into the real frequency note, group strings of successive frames of the same frequency together, and finally reproduce the calculated sound. So here's the question. Why do we go through this entire process just to reproduce sound when we can simply use a microphone? Well, the advantage of using this approach as compared to a microphone is that it isolates background noises. What I'm trying to say is that you can go to a concert and then record a live guitar performance, return home, and replay the recording without hearing cheers from the audience. You can possibly record a guitar showdown performance and replay, selectively listening only to the songs you want to hear on one of the guitars. So, what is the final result of the project? Now, this is how a part of the original song sounds like. And this is how we expect the reproduced song to sound like. And this is how it currently sounds like. Clearly, the calculated pitch result is way off from the original, but we are able to hear the similarity in the rhythm and the tempo of the song. Looking back at the algorithm, my supervisor and I were able to identify the sections of the code that could lead to the slight change as compared to the real frequency notes, and that is the extraction of the pixel frequency. Before I further justify our findings, I will first walk you through in further detail the entire process of reproducing the song played on the guitar. This project can be separated into three stages: the image processing stage, the frequency extraction stage, and the frequency recalibration stage. In the image processing stage, the project has to convert an image into an informative data. If we can remove unnecessary information from each frame of the video other than the strings, the computation for the following stages will be more convenient. Hence, the project uses edge detection algorithms. The filter used on this video is called Gaussian filter. It works by finding the difference in intensity of the pixel values in the X direction and the Y direction of the video image, and square root the sum of squared of these two directions. This filter may not be the project's best option because it outlines the fingers and the sound hole too clearly, which would affect the computation at the later part of the project. In fact, this project only filters in the Y direction, and you can clearly see from this that most part of the fingers and the sound hole is removed. The next step is to transfer all this information into the XY Cartesian plane and extract frequency values on each string in each frame, the frequency extraction stage. The first step to this stage is to be able to display the string values in different windows. This can be easily done by running a column sum on the image. Whichever row with the highest sum shows the position of the string. With this, we can individually plot each string on the different graph. Notice that the string is relatively thinner as compared to the previous video. In the previous video, we see the thickness of the string, but we only need the string to be 1 pixel thick to calculate the frequency. So here's how the program solves this challenge. This image shows us the elements in the matrix that holds the values of the wave. If we run a cumulative sum on the wave, we are able to identify the different positions of the string. The program selects the middle value of the string and extracts the location of these points and plot them on the Cartesian plane. Now we can start calculating for the frequency of the sound wave. The program calculates the period of the graph by first looking at the zero crossings of the graph. Any points that passes through the mean will be identified as the zero crosses. Now that we are able to locate the zero crosses, we are able to calculate the period, which is the distance of 3 zero crosses. Frequency is then the inverse of the period calculated. Note that the frequency calculated at this stage is the pixel frequency. In other words, this pixel frequency represents the frequency of the string, not necessarily the frequency of the real note. This is when we move on to the last stage, the frequency recalibration stage. So here's the idea behind the calibration algorithm. The change in frequency of successive semitones are in multiples of the 12th root of 2. This means that you have to multiply the frequency of a C note by a 12th root of 2 in order to get the frequency of a C sharp. In the same way, you have to multiply the frequency of a C note by 12th root of 2 4 times in order to get the frequency of E. It is a geometric increase, not arithmetic. To simplify the calculations, the project turns the equation into a logarithmic function. In this case, it will become an arithmetic increase. Or to further simplify the equation, it will look like this. From the equation, it tells us that if we have the reference node, log C, we can find out the other corresponding frequencies. If I know what the pixel frequency of a C note is, I will know what the pixel frequency of an E note is by substituting x into 5, because the distance between the C note and an E note is 4 semitones apart. What we need is to set the value of the y-intercept in order to find the other frequencies. Therefore, this program sets the lowest frequency that can be played on the guitar, the open E string, as the y-intercept. By rearranging the equation, we can also identify which semitone is the pixel frequency supposed to be. This equation tells us that we can find the number of semitones apart an unknown calculated pixel frequency is from the pixel frequency of the open string by putting in the value of the calculated frequency into the equation. Now you have to remember that the pixel frequency is not the same as the real frequency. If we can find the value of x, we will then know which real frequency note does this pixel frequency belong to. This is because we already know that the reference frequency is the open E string. And by calculating how many semitones away the unknown pixel frequency is from the reference frequency, we can immediately identify which frequency note does this unknown variable belong to. However, we do not know which calculated frequency represents the frequency of the open E note. By the time the project reaches to this stage, it is almost approaching to the end of the project deadline. To brainstorm an idea that smartly calibrates the pixel frequency into the real frequency note will take longer than a span of a few weeks. In order to achieve the aim of the project, the program currently selects frequencies that are recognizable manually for further calibration. In the first part of the video, the guitarist played the open string. Therefore, by manually identifying the locations of these frequencies in the beginning of the video, the program then calibrates the pixel frequencies into the real frequency notes. The next step is to group successive frequency values of the same strings in different frames into the same frequency. This image shows us the frequency value of a particular string from the first frame to the last frame of the video. It is all jumbled up. During the calculation of the frequency, the program also identifies the amplitude of each string. This graph shows us the amplitude of each frequency of the same string throughout the frames. It shows us that after every spike, the amplitude decreases. It tallies with our understanding that after a string is strummed, it vibrates and gradually comes to a stop, which means that every sudden increase in a peak shows that it is the beginning of a new strumming note. Therefore, the program is set to know that between each peak, the frequency calculated should be the same. Hence, the frequencies are grouped together to be that of the same frequency. And this is how the frequencies are calculated and replayed into the computer. As shown earlier in this video, the accuracy of the reproduced sound is way off from the real sound. This is because the program's approach to calculate the pixel frequency is not robust. Here's an example. While the plot shows that the graph passes through the zero crossing, that specific zero crossing is missing in the matrix. This influences the calculation of the frequency, and you can expect that the frequency is easily doubled or half of the expected frequency, because remember, we calculate the period by finding the distance between 3 zero crossings. So ultimately, this zero crossing method is not robust. If given more time, I will approach this challenge again by using a simplified version of Fourier transform. In summary, Fourier transform is able to decompose all the sound waves into the frequency that make it up. It fits multiple waves into the extracted sound wave. Each wave is double the frequency of the previously fitted wave. The frequency of the sine wave that best fits the sound wave is the best frequency to represent the graph. So I have done a quick FFT on this graph called the B3 string, which is the 5th string from the top of the guitar. As you can see here that you have a rough estimate of 2¼ periods in the graph. We expect the calculated frequency to be in a range of 2 to 3 periods. Here's the FFT of the same graph. And here what you see is the Fourier transform FFT that was applied in MATLAB. If we zoom in further, we will see that there are many high frequency components in the graph. That's because the extraction of the graph is not 100% accurate. But what we can see in here when we zoom in is that the highest frequency is not in the 2nd or 3rd period, but is in fact the 8th period, which shows us that even FFT is not 100% accurate. But FFT would definitely give a higher robustness as compared to the zero crossing. Therefore, more time is needed to be able to accurately identify the correct frequency. There is also a challenge of the robustness on the choices of the videos used to analyze and calculate the frequency values. Videos chosen has to be taken from inside the sound hole of the guitar, not outside. This will remove the edges of the bridges that can be detected on the guitar when taken from the front, and other edge noises that could potentially interfere with the detection of the string locations. Even when the video is taken from the inside, the camera should be facing an empty but bright area to reduce noises from trees, buildings, and so on. One thing that the program is able to do is that it is able to reorient the image into a position that best suits the program. Remember that the program identifies the string location in the image by running a column sum on the image. This assumes that the strings are parallel to the horizontal axis of the image. To ensure that the program runs for different videos, the program introduces the half transform. The half transform is able to identify straight lines in the image. If the strings are not strummed, it would appear like a straight line, which can be detected by the half transform as shown in this picture. By being able to determine the position of the string, the program will be able to calculate if the strings are tilted and if it needs to be reoriented. The only flaw to this function is that it cannot be applied on strumming strings. Otherwise, the half transform will not be able to locate the string locations because it's no longer straight. This also means that the half transform can only be applied once in the beginning of the video when the guitar strings are not strummed. This also means that the program assumes the video does not tilt in the middle of the recording. Otherwise, the strings will not appear on the window location that we have identified in the front of the video. As a conclusion, I think that this project has proven the possibility of using the rolling shutter aliasing effect to identify the sound wave distorted on the string of the guitar. This means that recording a live guitar performance or a guitar showdown and replay it without any background noises is possible. Here's a video of Abe Davis explaining what other features we can use rolling shutter effect for.
Most cameras record images one row at a time. And so if an object moves during the recording of a single image, there's a slight time delay between each row. And this causes slight artifacts that get coded into each frame of a video. And so what we found is that by analyzing these artifacts, we can actually recover sound using a modified version of our algorithm. So here's an experiment we did where we filmed a bag of candy while a nearby loudspeaker played the same Mary Had a Little Lamb music from before. But this time, we used just a regular store-bought camera. And so in a second, I'll play for you the sound that we recovered. And it's going to sound distorted this time. But listen and see if you can still recognize the music.
Although this project is far from achieving the presentable reproduction of the original sound, I think that this project is only the scratch of the surface of what we can do with the rolling shutter effect. Because if what Abe Davis said is true, it would mean that we can use rolling shutter effect to even detect my vocal vibrations on my throat, and the program will be able to interpret my speech. If that is the case, it will be a new profound discovery that can aid the deaf in listening. Because remember, this approach can isolate background noises. It will help the deaf in concentrating on what they want to hear. Thank you for watching.